the more I felt anger and hatred for my father and my stepmom. When my father found out that he was left with nothing, he started flipping the tables and started screaming, asking why he wasn't left with anything. It was clear that my father only cared about my mother's assets, and not for her. I decided to leave my hometown and cut ties with my father and his mistress. I decided to move to my mother's beach house where I would try to start over. I've always worked from home, so moving to another area was never a problem. It wasn't until recently I got a text message from my stepmom. She asked me how I was doing and I didn't respond. She texted again and she was more straightforward. She told me that I needed to move out of the beach house because my father and her will be moving in. But if I wanted to stay, I could pay them rent for my room. I looked at the text completely speechless, not knowing if she was bluffing or if she was serious. I told her that the house was under my name, and that I would call the cops if they ever set foot inside my home. She never responded afterwards. I thought that was the end of it until a couple weeks later, and I had gotten a notification from my phone while I was out grocery shopping that there was motion near my driveway. I opened the app and saw both my stepmom and father stepping outside their vehicle as they continued to unpack their belongings. My heart sank, and I immediately felt anger inside me. I decided to call the cops ahead of time and told them that I had people trespassing my property. By the time I had arrived, the cops were also there.
You can now check if there's a part 2 by pressing share and more.
My greedy mother-in-law demanded I give her my late mother's house because my father told her she could part 2. I arrived at my house, and the cops were already talking to my father and my mother-in-law. I approached them, and my father looked at me and started yelling. He called me names and called me a disgrace for calling the cops on his own family. My stepmother tried playing the victim with the cops, saying they were just visiting me and checking up on me because I was still coping with the loss of my mother. I got angry and started cursing at her for bringing up my mother. The cops, looking confused and trying to calm down the situation, asked for both of our sides privately. The officers took my father and mother-in-law for questioning, and during that time, I took the time to calm myself down. I was shaking and alone. I thought I could leave in peace, but my father kept ruining it. The officer then approached me for questioning, and I provided confirmation of my identity and ownership of the beach house, as well as the text messages my mother-in-law had sent, and a full explanation as to why they were trying to take my property. The officers understood, and were clear that they were going to take my side. One of the officers even looked disgusted when he heard the full story. What's even crazier is despite trying to tell them to leave, and warnings from the officers, it took them an hour until they finally decided to leave my property. I thanked the cops, and I thought that they would learn their lesson and leave me alone. But over the past few days, they've continued to harass me with constant phone calls, threatening messages, and even attempted to get support from other relatives to pressure me into giving up my house. They continued to try to bully me into submission, but I will not fall for it. I documented everything, every call, text message, and the footage from them trying to come to my house. I decided to finally take them to court. During the trial, my lawyer provided multiple pieces of evidence of their harassment. The judge sided with me in the end. A restraining order was issued against my mother and father-in-law, prohibiting them from further attempts to contact me or go to my house. They were also ordered to pay for damages, compensating me for emotional distress. My father and I looked at each other one last time, and his face filled with disappointment and anger, but I didn't care. I cried in happiness afterward while I sat in my living room. It was finally done, and I was finally at peace. I could finally restart my life, and a couple of years later, I ended up getting married.
You can now check if there's a part 3 by pressing share and more.